Paul Britton, who's a leading criminal defence lawyer and founder of Britton and Time, and also Beth Mantel, who's team leader at the Northwest Complex Crime Department at Reed Solicitors. So here's my question. At the moment, and this historic moment, and I know Scotland's already been televising some of its court cases, but at the moment they're just focusing on the judge. I mean, number one, why bring cameras into a courtroom anyway? Paul, do you want to start with that?
Well, look, cameras into a courtroom, cameras as we're seeing them today, capturing the video live, isn't really a new thing for some of the civil courts. If we look at the Supreme Court of England and Wales, that's been televised since 2009. And the Court of Appeal has also televised all of the proceedings. And when I say all of the proceedings, it's not just the judgment. Now, what we've seen in the Crown Court, and it is just the Crown Court, it's not the magistrates, which deals with lower level crimes or what are considered lower level crimes, is just the judgment. We've only seen Her Honour, Sarah Munro, QC, delivering what was a very articulate, clear and concise judgment that allows the public to see how serious these proceedings are.
Do you think anyone was in doubt of that? I mean, a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but we already knew that. Beth, I mean, again, I'd ask you, why do you think that this is important? Do you think it's just the start? Are we going to end up seeing, like, you know, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp type, you know, televised court situations?
Ultimately, my view is that open justice is a good thing. Since the criminal justice system has brought in any type of recording, whether that be recording police interviews, police now have to wear body-worn videos, that has only ever been for the greater of good. So in my view, the public, there's so much uncertainty in relation to sentences, the sentences that criminals receive. It's a good thing for them to be a party to the proceedings and be able to understand why a judge has passed a particular sentence, but that's only if the sentencing remarks are thorough and factual, so they can understand it properly.
But don't you think people are going to be more in? I was going to say, don't you think people are more interested in, you know, looking at the defendant and hearing what they have to say and what have you? I mean, I'm just thinking again with something like, and I use that as an example because, or O.J. Simpson's, let's say, in the States way back then. I mean, people see it as a drama as much as from the legal point of view, you may feel, well, this will open people's eyes up to the sentencing. Does it have any future without including other reasons? So people can, I mean, I listened to the QC, Sarah Munro, and part of me was like, but what is the evidence? I didn't hear the evidence. What else is going on? Is that going to be a problem, Paul?
I don't think it is. Look, I can give you a real life example. I was in the criminal court just last week, and as I arrived, my client said to me, I didn't realise it was going to be this serious. And there is a naivety with the public that these proceedings are a one chance to get your defence, in this case, a defence across to the judge. And the judge, you're going to be sentenced. I mean, if you listen to Her Honour Munro, when she made the sentence, take him away, take him down. And that is really the finality of it. And I think for clients, it's those words that really stick with them when they can see it on television. I don't think we're going the way of the states, sensationalising proceedings. And I say that because this is a criminal court. We haven't seen the witness evidence. The problem with putting witness evidence out live is that people can then judge that witness depending on which side they're on, and people are going to form their own views. And we live in a society now where everything is quite quick to go online, and they can become the target of abuse. But the guidance is very clear that witnesses, defendants will be protected and they won't be aired and sensationalised and put on our television sets for that very reason. Because if they were, Trisha, what we would see is people not coming forward to give witness evidence. They would say, I just don't want to get involved. And then then the justice system would really have a problem.
Do you think as well, I mean, the change in the law that allowed this to happen was a little while back, but thanks to COVID, it's only just come out now. But do you think people are maybe, Beth, more acceptable of this because of COVID, because so much has been done, you know, people seeing people go through all sorts of things on the screen and not being there in actuality? And for you, why not involve, if not witnesses, why not involve the accused and the defendant and the, you know, both sides? Why not involve the barristers?
Well, in my view, I can understand in some cases just they cannot be televised due to perhaps them being a youth or it's a sensitive subject, so a sensitive case. For me, a sentencing hearing is a very dynamic process. You know, the advocates have disagreements about case law, about the sentencing guidelines, about the culpability. They talk about the facts of the case. A lot of these defendants who are facing sentence have had very, very difficult lives. They have strong mitigating circumstances that are put forward. For me, it is important for transparency for the public, for them to hear all the sides, not just the Crown's case, not just the words from the judge, send him down, here's life, here's 10 years. It's important for them to see a whole range of cases, not just the ones that the media have got a grip on, that people think are exciting because they've been made excited by the media.
So you're saying that, it sounds like you're saying that you feel in some cases it should be actually widened a little bit. And Beth, we were talking about, you mentioned that just as we saw the verdict and the sentencing, you feel when it comes to televising that, which is a great beginning, it doesn't sound like you think it gives the complete picture of what really was going on. What more do you think would you like to see to really help people understand these kinds of cases?
I thought the sentencing remarks earlier this week by Her Honour Judge Sarah Monroe-Kesey was very thorough. It was very detailed. It talked about the facts. It talked about the sentencing guidelines. And for a lay person, it would give them, in my view, an understanding about the process a judge has to go through in order to reach their decision as to what the sentence is. What my concern is going forward is televising sentencing remarks just an exercise to show the public dangerous offenders getting huge sentences? You know, is that the only reason what it's for? Because the range of sentencing powers available to a judge, that, you know, a lot of sentences do not result in an immediate custodial sentence. You know, restitution, rehabilitation, that's something that a judge has to consider. And you see in the papers, you know, every day, the general public think that people have got too easy a sentence or it's too low because they don't understand the sentencing guidelines. And for me, if televising sentencing is going to become more common, it has to be a wide range of sentences so the public can understand why maybe somebody hasn't gone to prison when in their eyes they think they should have done.
So, but you'd still have the camera just on the judge. Is that what you're saying? Or would you hear part of what the prosecution and the defense lawyers, they're wrapping up or something? Would you expand it more to enable people to understand more why a judge might hand down rehabilitation or restitution, things like that?
I think it would be on a case-by-case basis. For example, maybe a victim impact statement that's read out in a sentencing procedure. And it wouldn't be right for that victim to have their feelings read out to the world, to the country. But I think if there was a case that allowed it to be, I think that is definitely more interesting and eye-opening for the public to see both sides of the argument, and then prior to the judge reaching their conclusion.
Paul, would you agree with that?
Well, I mean, Trisha, if we go back, it wasn't always the case that these recordings were prohibited and banned from courtrooms. It came in as a consequence of the Criminal Justice Act in 1925, almost 100 years on from them. The type of cameras that were used then were very large. They had very intrusive flashes. They prevented the judge from hearing the proceedings. They interfered with the administration of justice. What we have now are very innocuous cameras that can be very targeted. And I think the judgment that we had last week was a really good example of how judgments, I can assure you they don't all go that well. And Her Honour Munro delivered it excellently. I don't think I've seen a judgment that was so good. She went through the background, she went through the sentencing guidelines, she talked about giving credit for an early plea, she talked about mitigating circumstances. I don't think there's any reason to believe that that isn't going to be the norm going forward. So I'm not too sure about...
So let me jump in there. Sorry, let me jump in there, Paul. Do you think then, if things are going to be televised, that maybe judges will probably, those who aren't like the QC we saw on film, do you think it might spur some judges to be, I don't know, cover more in their sentencing?
Yeah, I'm sure they've been delivered some very precise guidance, and I think Her Honour Munro must have gone through some sort of almost rehearsal of that, because it was very good. But remember, in the civil side, the Supreme Court is already recorded, and the Court of Appeal is recorded, and it's not just the judgments; it's every minutiae. Now, there is a slight difference between those courts and the Crown, is that you don't tend to have witness evidence in those courts, the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal, are really discussing legal arguments on points of law that shape the law going forward in this country.
And just for, Scotland already has what sort of coverage? I mean, Scotland's different to England.
Well,
how does their coverage... Yeah, sorry, go on, Paul.
Yes, Scotland never really had a restriction. Remember, I think Beth we're England and Wales lawyers, so we deal with the law in England and Wales.
Yeah.
Scotland's never really had the same sort of restriction. The Lockerbie bombings, that was recorded. I think there was a sentencing, or actually all the proceedings in 2012. You can simply make an application to court but the media can make an application to court to record and broadcast from those courts.
So so the question is, why doesn't the UK do the same, Beth?
I think the England and Wales justice system, it's old-fashioned in its procedures. There's never been a reason for them to do that. I think this has been brought in because the government are trying to persuade the public that criminal justice is being done. I don't think, and I think the technicalities in relation to the cases, the witness evidence, the defendants, the police evidence and everything else, I just don't think it would work properly in this country. And I think it would end up being, there would be so many parts of it that would have to be not included. It still wouldn't work as being a fair picture. It's
a good point that Beth touches on there. I mean, if we think about government and Parliament has been scrutinised since the 90s. They've been broadcasters. We've seen Prime Minister's questions. We now have Parliament TV. The Supreme Court, I think, is live permanently on one of the Sky channels. So this is really just the natural... I don't think that the British, the English and Wales legal system is backward or falling behind. I actually think it's quite a finely tuned instrument, and what we find is a lot of cases actually come to the UK to be litigated because our legal system is so sophisticated. This is really just focusing on one little area, which is, are we going to broadcast them? We are broadcasting them. I think the public are right to be able to see them. They can now scrutinise the judiciary. They can see what the judges are doing, and they can fully appreciate how serious these proceedings are. I think that's the salient point.
Absolutely.